Our next speaker is going to be Mr. Tom Cook, St. John's, Michigan dairy grazer, and he's going to be talking to us about Michigan grazing dairy industry trends.
All right. Is that good?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Floor is yours.
All right. As Caleb said, my name is Tom Cook. I am a fourth generation dairy farmer here in Pewamo, Michigan, talking on the latest grazing dairy trends. So I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about my farm and what I do. I'd like to think that I'm kind of on the cutting edge. So with that, here's a picture of my wife and my three children. They've been a valuable part of the operation over the years as they've matured. And yeah, they're sorely missed as they've moved on from high school and college and done other things. So here's an aerial view of my dairy farm. As you can see, I'm fairly progressive for a grazing dairy. I have bunkers for corn silage, for haylage, and you can see several rows of baleage stored there on the right-hand side, like Dennis was talking about earlier. And there's also a manure pit out back on the top of the screen there. So I utilize a lot of the same technologies of the conventional dairy, but I also incorporate the grazing. So with that, I've been grazing for 20 years now. Started out at about 140 cows and now have grown it up to over 300 cows in the last 20 years. Along with that, the replacements and the other supplemental acreage. I have 2 full-time Hispanics along with high school help and whatnot. It works out to 5 full-time equivalents when you add up the hours. When it comes to the livestock on our farm, we try and group our calves to be born all in the month of March and utilize mob feeding. It works great. We use sex semen to breed our heifers and our cows. When it comes to the heifers, we AI them one time with sex semen, and then we turn them out to pasture and let them have access, or Angus bulls have access to them for a month, thus eliminating the lower valued Holstein bulls. We're trying to achieve a higher revenue by only having heifer calves born and only having beef calves born so that we don't have the low value Holstein bulls. When it comes to the milk cows, we don't use any bulls in the last 2-3 years. It gives me peace of mind knowing that the help is safe and secure. You don't have to worry about bulls. In doing so, we do all AI. And as you can see in this picture, they're wearing necklaces. That's one of the new technologies that I've incorporated. And I highly encourage others to look into it. It's expensive, but boy, the SCR technology, those monitors, they do a great job on heat detection. And like I say, we use sex semen for the first 3-4 weeks and then switch over to beef semen, trying to increase our revenue potential there. And also the last 3 years, I've incorporated a fall calving season to try and eliminate overcrowding my facilities, but yet at the same time, increasing my annual milk production by having more milk flow in the winter months. Currently, we're calving about 240 animals in the spring. That includes the heifers and the cows. And then in the fall, we just have roughly 70 cows that didn't get caught in the spring or can go another 6 months on the lactation and still be profitable. So far it's been working out quite well. Here's a layout of the breakdown of what I grow on an annual basis on my farm. As you can see, we got pasture along with alfalfa and some row crops there. When it comes to those row crops, I do like to incorporate some crop insurance in there just in case Mother Nature doesn't allow for a perfect growing season. It's nice to have an insurance policy in place. So, and also, this is an aerial photo of all the pastures I have. There's over 200 acres there, broke up into over 30 different paddocks. The smaller squares that you see there are devoted typically mainly for the milk cows. On the lower left, there is 70 acres that's broke out just for the mature heifers. And then a mile off the picture, I have 30 acres that I raise my calves on after they move out of the hutches. So as you can see, pasture is an important part of my program. And 3 years ago, by the aid of my crop insurance agent, I came across something called pasture and rangeland forage crop insurance, or as I like to call it, rain insurance for my grazing ground. And I found this to be very beneficial because, as we know, we need grass to feed these cows. It needs to grow. And when the rain doesn't come, your lawn and your pasture is the first thing to go brown. So this has proven to be very effective for me. Basically, you're insuring for 90% of the average rainfall in any given month that you so designate. So on my farm, with the input of my agent, we insured the months of March and April, which seems ridiculous because you're not grazing in March usually. But statistically, that's when you're most apt to get a payout on this program. So I went with half my acreage in those 2 months. And then I put the other half of the acreage in the months that I felt were most vulnerable to me, which were June and July. So as you can see by the slide, it's cost me a little over $5 and it's paid over $20 a year over these last 3 years. So definitely something to consider for those of you out there that are grazing. Along with that, I also try and harvest extra feed throughout the summer to feed my cattle throughout the winter months. I do kind of like Dennis Hancock said, I go out there and I clip my milk cow pastures sometime in midsummer. I'll raise the disc vine up. I'll put spacers in so the skid plates aren't even touching the ground. We're clipping it 4 to 6 inches in height, just getting the refusals that the cows don't want to eat and wrapping that up as baleage, fairly dry because I'm worried about the manure content that may be in the bales and may cause some clostridial. But this is another way of keeping your pastures well managed and giving you more feed in the winter months. Another trait that I have learned to adapt over the years for planting alfalfa is doing it in the spring with a cover crop. I feel this gives me the best, cleanest stand with the least weed competition, and also gives you the most production and tonnage in that establishment year. You get a very good tonnage on this triticale peas, and I average over 18% crude protein. I have had it as high as 22% crude protein. So it's just one of the things I've grown accustomed to and like. Another necessary evil on any grazing dairy farm is pasture renovation. I seen earlier in the chat questions, somebody was asking about how to thicken up or renovate pastures. I own a no-till drill. It's a good way to try and thicken up an old stand. But if you're dealing with quackgrass or thistle or undesirable grasses that you're trying to eliminate, I have found even Roundup Ready or Roundup doesn't kill some of those undesirable grasses. I've had to go in there, and with my acreage base, I have the equipment, I have the horsepower. I'll just rip up the field and reestablish it either by way of a summer production of sorghum sedan grass, or what I've done the last 10 years is I rip it up in the spring and I'll plant a 90-day short day corn silage, harvest it by October 1st, go back in there, put some manure on there, work it up, reseed it back to permanent pasture. And 9 out of the last 10 years, it's worked beautifully. So, corn silage is a great crop to incorporate into any dairy farm. I feel even a grazing dairy farm. A lot of my fellow grazers didn't agree with me in years past, but they're starting to come around to my way of thinking. So it's kind of nice when you're getting some justification out there. Another way I incorporate corn silage into my crop rotation is by way of double cropping. I'll put in corn silage after first cutting alfalfa, or I'll harvest the corn silage and then plant a fall seeding of triticale and peas and harvest that the following spring. I'll fertilize it too in April like you would your wheat. That'll give you an increase in protein and an increase in tonnage. So like I say, in the old days, I called it double cropping because I'm quite frugal and try and be more efficient. But nowadays, this is called cover crops, and it's deemed as quote unquote more sustainable, which is something that we're going to have to become more accustomed to in the ag community. These practices that I just alluded to is something I've been doing for years, but now in the last 12 months, my milk co-op MMPA in partnership with a couple of their customers that they sell dairy products to, have given us a financial incentive to go ahead and do more cover crop and do some soil health studies to try and prove that it reduces the environmental impact from nutrient management and thus makes us more ecologically responsible and being better stewards of the lands. As most of us out there know, we try and be the best stewards to our animals and our land. We just need to start being a better message out there to the general public. So this is just one step, and I see more to come. So along with that, as I said, corn silage can be an effective complement to any dairy, especially a grazing dairy. If you can't grow it, like I alluded to just now, other farmers I've talked to have bought corn silage out of the field from their neighbors, put it up as silage in an ag bag or in a pad on their own farm and fed it back to their cows. So I definitely encourage you to look into it. Along with that, Cornell, about 10 years ago, did a study on their grazing dairy farms. They had 15 to 20 of them. And they found that those that added corn silage into their program increased their milk production 15 to 20%, and also increased their net profit anywhere from 5 to 10% on the average. So with those kind of numbers backing you up, I don't think you can go wrong. So that Cornell information is something that I acquired over the years, being part of something I call the Grassroots Grazing Group. It's a group of us grazing dairy farmers in the surrounding states. We get together and meet at different farms throughout the year, where we tour the individual's operation, hopefully learn some tricks of the trades we can take back to our own farm. And then after lunch, we sit down and we have a heart-to-heart with the farmer and tell him where he's doing things right and where maybe he can improve upon things to maybe make himself some more profit. So it's been a great organization. We're always looking for new members because some have retired, like my good friend Howard Straub and Dave Forgy down in Indiana. Those are people I've learned a lot from over the years. And now I feel I'm starting to impart my wisdom on some of the other younger people in the group. So if anybody out there is interested in learning more about this, at the end of the presentation, you'll see my email address. I encourage you to reach out. Maybe we can hook up and try and get more participation into this group, because it's served me well over the years. Along with this, we are required to submit our financials once a year to Jason Karzis from Cornell out in New York. They're kept confidential, but in doing so, it gives me a chance to review my own financials on an annual basis, which I really like. Here's a blow up of just some of the numbers. I hope you can see it. What I like to look at is up in that top square. The bottom line shows you the net milk price I've received over the last 3 years. $16 was this past year, not as good as the year before. And 2 years ago, it was $14.82. These aren't great prices because, as you can see, the line in the middle of that square, operating cost of producing 100 pounds of milk. That is defined as the cost of just paying the bills for milking the cows, the electric bill, the feed bill, the labor bill. That's my true cost of production, just to pay the bills. The top line is the other one that I really like, the total cost of producing 100 pounds of milk on my dairy farm. That includes depreciation of assets. That includes a return to the owner operator, myself, because like most small and medium dairy farmers, we don't give ourselves a wage. But if you were to include that in there, that's what that cost of production reflects, along with a 5% return on equity. Because as any good business should have, you should get a return on your assets or your equity. So that is what I like to consider the true cost of producing 100 pounds of milk on my farm. If I was a profitable businessman, that's the number that I should shoot for a milk price, which you can see is very hard to come by. But anyway, I digress. The bottom square there, net farm income per cow without appreciation, That's another gold standard that I look at, and try and achieve $1,000 net profit per cow. That's kind of the golden echelon, and I've only attained it 2 or 3 times in the 15 years I've been doing these numbers. It takes a good milk price. So along with that, you can see some of the ratios on the bottom for financial summary. I whited out the one just below financial summary of farm net worth. I'm going to keep that to myself. But that's a number I look at. I want to know that my net worth is going up every year and not going down. So I'm sure a lot of farms out there do their own annual audits, but this is what I do, and I do it in coordination with my grassroots members. It's really been beneficial to me. So once again, those of you interested, I encourage you to reach out, because you're never too old to learn, and that's why I'm a part of the grassroots group. With that, I also wanted to say on a final note, you need to balance your farm with your family and your friends, and taking time for them to make memories that'll last a lifetime. So with that, I want to thank you. And if there's any questions, fire away. I'll have to figure out how to close up this screen and see if there's any questions in the chat box. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. I've always appreciated you and your family's willingness to host pasture walks on your farm. I've had the opportunity to attend at least 2 of those over the years. And you're always a great host, you and your family, and always willing to share information to help better your fellow grazers. I don't see any questions in the chat, but if you do have folks, go ahead and put them in there. Yes, we're running a little bit behind, but I had an extension educator who's now retired mentor me over the years a long time ago. And he said, Cable, these presenters put lots of work into their talks, so give them their due time. So we are a little bit behind, but we're going to manage. Just work with us. One thing is the drive home won't be too bad for you, so we can run a little over on time. Quick question that I have, Tom. You mentioned during your talk plates that you add to the skid plates on your hay mine to increase the cutting height. Can you talk about those real quick?
It's just spacers on the hydraulic cylinders. I just put spacers in so it doesn't go down all the way.
Okay.
That way the skid plates aren't even touching the ground when I clip my pastures. You know, when it comes to mowing my hay fields, I mow them pretty low just like everyone else. But sure. No, I just put a spacer in the hydraulic cylinder. That way I don't have to guess them by golly with the hydraulic lever in the cab.
Gotcha. So. Okay. Thank you. One other quick question. The grassroots grazing group that you mentioned, is that a dairy only group?
Yeah,
okay.
For right now it is. I guess we'd be open to others, but it'd be hard to relate to some beef people. Maybe I've been a part of this forage council for years. And when I went down to the National Grazing Conference, I found out, not to be arrogant, but us dairy farmers, we put a lot of emphasis on quality and inefficiencies that even beef and horse people just don't, in my opinion. I hope I don't offend people there, but it's tough making it in the dairy industry some years. So,
I do have a question from Jason. Can you explain the rain insurance program, how it works with a shortage of rainfall?
90% of the average rainfall is what you're insuring against. So each county, each township, I believe, has records that the insurance company utilizes to go on. And then it records the rainfall for any given area, not just my county, but just, I think it's almost based on a township basis. But I encourage you to reach out to your crop insurance agent and look into it, because he just stumbled into my yard 3 years ago. I've been using him for years and said, hey, rain insurance for grazing ground just got revamped through risk management. It's now much more affordable. So like I say, 3 years ago, it became much more affordable. And that's why I did it. And I think you got to choose a 2-month period. So I chose March and April, as I said, and June and July. I don't know the details any better than that, but it's been a no-brainer for me. Much more affordable than row crop insurance at $5.50 an acre. It's not that much of a risk.
Okay. I don't believe there's any more questions. Again, Tom, thank you for sharing with us today.
No problem. Go green.
Go white.